Good morning, everyone. I'm Carolina from Making Life, and today I'm here to interview Piero Iamartino, President of the European Industrial Pharmacist Group, and of course, members of AFI.
Yeah, thank you, Carolina. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Of course, I'm here particularly today as a representative of the working group of AFI dedicated to active ingredients. And this is the reason I used to coordinate this working group, and I was involved in organizing a specific session at our symposium about the APIs.
I think today and also during the symposium, we are going to talk about the big new, reform of the European pharmaceutical legislation that was being strongly needed lately and just yesterday came out. What are the main changes and how will they impact on citizens and of course on the pharmaceutical industry?
Yes, this was an important step forward in the legislation, the pharmaceutical legislation in Europe. The background of this new pharma legislation is, of course, the pharma strategy, which was developed more than 2 years ago. And the goal was to get a better patient-centered pharma environment and a better flourishing of the industry in Europe. This new legislation is focused, I would say, just read this morning something on three pillars. One is the patient, the other is the industry, European industry, and the other one is environment. This new legislation gives new directions on how to tackle important issues like shortages, which worsened in the last few years. At the same time, there are changes in the regulatory procedures, which are expected to improve the introduction of new products by speeding up the evaluation, the authorization. And at the same time, there is some important changes to stimulate the achievement of some unmet medical needs. All these focus on innovation for a better competitiveness of our industry.
As you said, your core expertise is about the active pharmaceutical ingredients. Does the new regulation bring changes in the APIs production or supply chain?
So APIs, of course, are carefully considered in this legislation, being an essential element of medicinal products. In the directive, we can find dedicated sections and some chapters, but substantially there is nothing new to be reported. Based on what I read, the most important things is about the supply chain, and this point is developed in the regulation. The new legislation includes one directive and one regulation. It is in the regulation where there's an important section about the security of the supply of medicinal products, where there is a request of identifying critical products, which are to be, the critical product list is to be submitted to the competent authorities. And the issue is about shortages management, but in this context, the attention is on the vulnerability of the supply chain, where, of course, the reliability of extra European sources of APIs is one key issue. The requirement is for better interactions with the authorities in collaboration to identify dangers and preventing interruptions of the supply chain.
So during the session of the symposium, the technical and economic aspect of the legislation will, of course, deepen, of course, about APIs. And do you think that something like environmental protection and the green project will be discussed?
Yes, of course. During the session at the symposium, we will have the opportunity to highlight the most important points which are present in the new legislation. And among these, of course, also the environmental protection. But I want also to add that in the new legislation, there is no specific requirement of reshoring of APIs.
Okay.
This was a discussion which started a few years ago, but the new legislation does not ask to start a reshoring process. Of course, it is possible, but we can't abandon the sources of APIs in extra-European countries. So this will be, I think, one point of discussion during our session. I want to also remind you that we, at the session in our symposium, we will have the opportunity to discuss with Mrs. Saikalis, who is the director of European Fine Chemicals Group, which is an important European organization representing many manufacturers of APIs and intermediates. So I think that it will be also the occasion to debate on a few points, because at that time, early June, the consultation period will not be finished yet.
Okay.
So it will be the opportunity to collect some opinion, a suggestion, which could be transmitted to European Commission. The key point, the final point I want to add is that, of course, the directive, it will be transferred in a national legislation in Italy as in all other countries. And the critical issue is about the harmonization. It will be important to come to harmonize the presence of national legislation. But the presence at the symposium, our symposium of Asking Pharma, and his president, it will be the opportunity to discuss about this point.
The harmonization of the legislation is something I heard talking about many of you coordinators about many topics. So I think it will be very needed to harmonize the legislation between every European country and have one great normative that everyone can follow. Thank you, Piero, for your time, and I hope to see you at AFI.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.